I was talking to a winery and I was saying, they were showing me the glass production of the bottle, and they were like, we ship the sand from the Middle East to New Zealand, then we blow it into glass bottles, then we fill it, then we ship it to the UK, and I'm buying millions of bottles of this stuff, right? And I'm thinking, this is quite a lot to deal with. Yeah. And then I'm back on the business class flight, flying back to the UK, taking up the space of 8 people. And I just felt like, wow, I'm really causing problems, or what I do is causing problems. What became really clear to me is there's no silver bullet that fixes everything in one go. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to say all the problems that there are with the emissions that come from making a bottle of wine, we solve it in one go. It's not possible. But what this does is it uses so much less carbon than what glass does. Yeah. So when a glass bottle is made in the total wine production, 50% of the emissions of that wine bottle is just from making the glass bottle. And I had this view of Hong Kong, and I was writing, this is the problem. This is the problem. What's the solution? And I had this huge, big, like crazy. I'm going to say beautiful mind, but that is definitely not. That's definitely not the case. But I wrote it all on the window and my plan, and slowly but surely it's
Founded in 2017, StartWell is Toronto's independent hub for innovators to collaborate. Our podcasts relate perspectives from the world's most diverse urban population to reflect unique insights into global business, media, and culture. Welcome to the studio, Andrew.
Thanks so much.
It's a pleasure to have you for the 55th episode of the StartWell podcast.
Wow. Almost my age.
We're trying to keep up to you, And for this one, I'm actually really excited to be here in the studio with you because I see you all the time.
Yeah.
We chat, we banter.
Yeah, we do.
We talk at the espresso bar.
Definitely.
And rather than coffee, we're talking about wine today, which is one of my favorite topics.
Me too.
But I don't think I've done an episode about wine for this series. So it should be quite fun.
Excellent.
And you were saying before you came in that this is your first time looking at even this setup, right?
Honestly, I had not been in here before. I'm amazed. It's incredible. It's a serious bit of kit you've got here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're pretty professional,
I can see that now.
So Andrew, let's go back to the beginnings of your supermarket adventures.
Of course.
Before we kind of paint this picture of the bottle that is here on the table and the company that it represents.
Okay.
Where did your career begin, according to you?
Yeah. So,
or what did you do for what did you do for your first pound?
I had a paper round when I was about 14 and I hated it, right? Who wants to deliver papers? It was in Manchester in the UK. It pretty much rains every day in Manchester. And it was a bit of a grim experience. But what I realised when I was doing that job is that there was a load of kids that were under 14 that wanted to do it but weren't allowed because of the employment laws around children working. So I ended up with 5 paper rounds and 5 people under the age of 14, which I then subcontracted the paper rounds to.
You're like the Uber delivery person?
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, exactly. I just
use.
It's all out. I don't want to do it myself. Exactly. So I was my first pound was probably some kind of child exploitation, but I was also a child. But yes, that was the first. But
that's entrepreneurial.
Yeah, so I think so. That was the first and sort of last time I was an entrepreneur, and my first actual job I worked for what now is Anheuser-Busch.
Okay.
So when I first went into the sort of workforce, that was my first ever role.
This was pre or post university, or
so I didn't go to university.
You did not.
No, I did not. I left school early, so I left school before I was supposed to. That's a long story for a total separate podcast.
What form?
I was 15 when I left school.
15.
I was 15, yeah, and it was by sort of mutual consent. I was
you and the headmaster.
Me and the headmaster had a good chat, and we came to the agreement that perhaps it was best for me not to be there.
An imprint of a boot was left on your buttocks.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. For both of us, I think.
Oh.
So I left school and I ended up working for my dad, who was a plumber. So I just went to, work in the family business, which, no disrespect to him, he's brilliant, but I absolutely hated it.
Oh,
I hated it. But
what were the worst things? Like, I'm sure it was a trying time, but like, you were a teenage angst and joining dad at work.
Exactly. I wanted to be in a band and I wanted to make art. I really didn't want to be, fitting radiators.
Yeah.
And he was great. He really put up with me. Like, I guess he's got no choice, right? But it was a time of realizing that I definitely messed up school, so that was a bit grim, and I was in this plumbing business that I didn't really want to be in. And people want heating fitted in the summer and all that kind of stuff, so you're crawling around in people's lofts or under the floor fitting pipes. It's absolutely horrendous. So I had an agreement with him that I would go through some kind of apprenticeship, finish it, and then he would let me go off and do whatever I wanted to do. And so I did that, and I went off traveling. So I traveled for maybe 2.5 years backpacking.
Wow.
And
all around Europe,
all around the world. I went all around the world. So
how did you at that age? Like how did you think about where you wanted to go?
I wanted to go to places that I knew people in my sort of circle had not been to. So I went to the Philippines and, all that kind of stuff. And It was when I got there, I realized, it's only people from where I live that aren't here. Everybody else is, it's a well-trodden path. But I had a great time. I worked my way around all through sort of Asia and Australia and around the other side, obviously this way, Canada and the US and down into Central America, South America, all through that, and was away for about 2.5 years in total. And so I consider that my education.
Wow. That's so fascinating, because at that point, your contemporaries of your age were probably just going into university if they were.
Yeah, they were. Right? That's right. They were
like 18, 19, and you came back from around the world.
Exactly. That's right. They were all, when I sort of came back and got into the workforce with Anheuser-Busch, you're right. They were all off to university or, being sensible. And I was a totally changed person. I went as,
Well, your eyes must have been like this big.
I went with a serious attitude problem and came back a changed man, I would say.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. I would not change it for the world. I mean, it's pretty tough, but, I just didn't want to stop. I just kept on going. And there's loads of times I thought maybe it's time to go home and I'll just have a word with myself and say, no, just go to the next place.
Home was the road.
A little bit like that. Yeah, it was. I look back on it now, perhaps with a little bit of rose-tinted glasses. And, I remember I could only afford to eat fruitcake because it had the most amount of calories in it at one point.
Wow.
And, that kind of stuff. But
along the way, you mean on the road?
Yeah, along the way.
So you got a little bit of money from your dad to set you off?
Yeah, a little bit to get going, from the salary that he paid me, which was, I remember it was like £27 a week. It was, it wasn't really much.
Right.
But I had enough for a one-way ticket somewhere and a bit of pocket money. And I just went and started working. As soon as I arrived anywhere, the first thing I did was look for a job,
Amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't on the beach enjoying myself.
So you were traveling, working, earning your way.
Correct.
And then what was the point when you came back and then got the job?
So a couple of things happened. I was in the middle of the outback of Australia, and I was in this sort of youth hostel, and this guy comes and sits at a table, and we're having dinner, and he had a boiled potato. That was it, right? So he's got this boiled potato, and he just eats it, and then he's really positive. Everything's great. I said, "You're just having a potato," and he says, "Yeah, that's all I eat." I was like, "You're only
potato diet," and he was not Irish.
No, don't know where he was from. Yeah, he was just a man, a guy on the road, and he'd been doing it for like 10 years.
Eating potatoes,
just on the road, and he wanted to be on the road as much as he could. So his expenses were absolute bare minimum, which meant he just ate a potato for his dinner. That was it.
There you go.
Yeah,
that was like me with my lunch earlier.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Eating potato chips.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I should probably just eat potatoes, but anyway. Wow. I just saw this guy, and I was like, oh my God, I think I might be turning into you. And that was like
kind of the wake-up call.
Yeah, a little bit like time to actually get real, I think.
Yeah, who wants to be potato man when they're an older gentleman?
Not me, not anymore.
Yeah. And so, AB.
Yeah, so...
What was that job?
Yeah, so I came back to the UK, or went back to the UK, and got a job at Boddington's Brewery in Manchester.
Lovely.
So, went to work there, and it was owned by a different company briefly until they bought it, and it became part of the big AB and InBev sort of empire that it is now.
Yeah.
And I just sort of worked from the start of the ladder, really. It was a sort of a sales role. I used to go and visit pubs and convince them to drink Boddingtons.
Kind of.
Yeah, extremely regional, just in Manchester. Huh. And started off there. And what I realised was I had this from somewhere. And I actually, if you'd asked me at any point in my life up to then, where would this come from? I would not have known, but I had this really strong work ethic. I could really connect with people quite easily because, when you're backpacking, you have to make friends with people immediately. Like they're your friends straight away. And so I was just really able to talk to people very casually, non-threatening, and also at the same time get them to buy Boddingtons, So
were those chats over Boddingtons?
Sometimes they were over a few pints of Boddingtons.
Right, that always helps.
Absolutely, yeah. It was the good old days. It was the 90s.
Try the product.
Yeah, exactly. So I really enjoyed it. Like, it was great. It was successful. They gave me a car and all that kind of stuff, So it was. Was
it painted with the logo of the beer?
It wasn't. No.
The Boddington mobile.
That might have been a deal breaker, They used to have if you were the top performing salesperson in the year, then you could use their private reg for the car, which was Beer One,
That's pretty
thankfully
cool.
I never had it, thankfully.
Probably get pulled over a lot by the cops.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and I would have had a boot full of beer as well.
Oh my God.
So so it was an interesting job, and I found out I was actually quite good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely talk to people and sell Boddingtons, and I just kept on getting promoted. It became a bit of a sort of running joke, really, that I would do a job for 6 months, it would be broken, I'd fix it, I'd put it into a good position, and then they'd hand it to somebody else and get me to come fix the next thing, and I would just keep on doing that, and that has pretty much defined my career up to this point, was fixing things and moving on.
What do you think is the maybe cultural aspect of that kind of, whoever the manager level was at whatever organization you were with, from the brewery onwards, that enabled that kind of like, what was that culture that enabled that promotion? Because today I don't know if that exists.
You've actually hit on something really, really important to me there, actually, that I didn't expect, is there was one individual that changed my life at Boddingtons.
Okay.
This guy, his name was Keith Ellis. Hi, Keith. And he was my line manager at the time. And I had a pretty unique way of working. It was the 90s, right? Everyone's walking around in suits and ties and all that sort of stuff. And I was definitely a jeans and t-shirt.
With their mobile phones.
Yeah, we all had the big Nokia phone, with a snake on it. And he accepted my individuality. I didn't want to be the guy in the suit, I just wasn't really interested in that. Did you have a mustache? No, I didn't have a mustache. No, I still don't think I could get a mustache going.
You're either a mustache guy or you're not a mustache guy.
I don't think I've ever been a mustache guy as much as I would like to be.
Yeah.
He just let me sort of be an individual in a very corporate, sort of stagnant environment, really. And, I wanted to be creative. That was important to me. Like, I always would do art, as a hobby on the side, and I wanted creativity in all aspects of my life. It needs to be there. And so he really sort of, empowered me to think that was okay to be creative. And when we became part of Anheuser-Busch, you've got these brands like Budweiser and Stella Artois, and
massive global brands,
these huge, nobody's supposed to mess with. And they let me mess with them a little bit.
What's an example?
Well, I remember I decided that there was a group of customers that were kind of they weren't buying so much from me or from Anheuser-Busch at the time. These are pubs, right? But they would have been buying from a competitor. And so, I would go and visit them, but they were like, well, we buy more whatever brand, than we buy of yours. So I decided it wasn't really worth my time, keep on going every month, having the same conversation, asking how his dog is, or whatever.
Yeah, just to warm him up for a cold conversation.
Exactly. So I started to design my own postcards, but using Anheuser-Busch brands.
Okay.
And I remember one that
mail out to these people you didn't want to visit in person.
Yeah, I thought, I'm just not going to visit you anymore. I'm just going to send you a postcard. A stamp is cheaper than me going, right? And so I would design these postcards, have them printed up, write on them, don't forget me, that kind of stuff, right?
That's great.
Nothing else. And I remember one was for Stella Artois, and it was basically just these big red lips, and it said, something about hot lips. I can't quite remember exactly what, but some a bit tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And it really worked. They thought they were funny. And so what happened is they'd come and say, hey, you should come next time. And then slowly but surely, all these pubs started
your card. They probably passed it around, maybe put it behind the bar.
They had it pinned up, all these things, right? And so my boss was like, well, you're really messing with these brands that they're not comfortable with, but nobody can deny the success. So
it's like the difference between sales and marketing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I was supposed to go and do the steps of the call. I had to go through the log, right? I wasn't supposed to send postcards that I had drawn myself. Like that wasn't really part of the Budweiser brand, criteria. So, but they realised it was working, and so they adopted it for broader. And they
that
said,
particular thing.
Yeah, they said, okay, look, maybe we won't send hot lips, but maybe we will send, some kind of postcards to customers that we're forgetting about.
So direct mail you might have brought direct mail to AB.
Yeah, I could have done.
Wow.
Oh dear me, I'm really sorry about that. But it definitely worked, and so they enabled me to make those kind of choices and made me feel like I could make them
Right.
and make bolder ones.
And so then from there, like how long were you in that position?
I worked for them for nearly 10 years. And then I moved over to work for Heineken for a short while, for a year. Absolutely hated it. From start to finish, it was from day one to day 365. Which
Heineken's like the IBM of the beer world, from what I understand. Like my friend Aleem Ladak, who used to, this is a guy in Nairobi who started a microbrewery. He was always his dream. It was always his dream. His dad is a cordon bleu chef. One of those guys, when you sleep over at their house, you wake up in the morning and you get some amazing meal,
Yeah.
And so he was always instilled with the values of culinary expertise.
Yeah.
And so when he became a brewmaster and started working the rounds, Heineken had him going, optimizing breweries across Africa.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's cool.
So he spent like 4 years, 5 years, I don't know how long it was, going and fixing, like, you can't brew Guinness in the Congo. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You can try.
Yeah. But like, why would you? It's just immoral, And so he gave up. He threw in the towel.
Oh, right.
After a number of years. And he said, I'm going to start a microbrewery. And it was
cool.
A big political revolution because the brewery, Kenya Breweries Limited in Kenya, that made Tusker, which is the number one brand, had government connections, was the only brewery.
That's right.
He was the number 2 brewery ever in East Africa.
Yeah.
Or I guess in Kenya. And
right.
Yeah, but Heineken kind of like propelled him into wanting to change the picture.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, they really wanted me, I think my experience there made me feel that I'd had enough of it, because the first day I had to go to Amsterdam and, in the head office, and it was all very intense and formal. It felt like I was in a step back to the 1960s. Everyone's, again, all in the suits and ties, and I sat
with mustaches.
You probably actually maybe in Holland they might have had mustache, and I ended up having this cup of tea, and it was in a Heineken branded cup and saucer with some Heineken plate of sandwiches and the whole experience was really intense, and I ended up having a nosebleed in the middle of this meeting because the way that they were operating was
had
just
an aneurysm.
Just like this is it. I'm out already, day one, and they really didn't like my my creativity or my t-shirt and jeans style. We just did not gel at all. It was a pretty grim.
How did that feel like though as an employee? Like you're now kind of like, oh my god, what did I?
Well, I felt like I made this huge mistake because I'd spent 8 years at Anheuser-Busch, and then I'd left for the money. They promised me extra money, great. They promised me a BMW, great. I'm thinking, okay, this is what I should want, right? This is what everyone aspires to.
Wait, what was the second thing that they promised you?
A BMW.
I thought you said that.
Yeah, right.
A BMW.
A BMW. I thought, wow, this is amazing, right?
Does that still happen?
I don't know.
Hey, lad.
Yeah.
This is where you want to be.
Yeah.
We'll give you the keys to a brand new BMW.
Exactly. It was that was kind of it. And I was like, of course, I'll take it. Where do I sign? Great, got in for it.
Brilliant.
And just a year of hell for me. It was absolutely awful. I hated every second of it.
Yeah.
And I think them too, to be fair. So, similar to my end of my school career, we had a similar conversation.
Right. Out you went.
Pretty much happily
onto greener pastures?
Yeah, so I'd been working with this with a company called, at the time, well, I think they are still called Metro in Germany. So they're a huge, big European retailer. They got it's a bit like
a grocer,
like Costco.
Okay,
but European,
bulk, bulk grocer.
Exactly, that's right. And I'd been working with them and supplying them and all that kind of stuff. And I could see that what they were doing didn't make any sense to me. So I was trying to speak to the buyer and get them to, why don't you try this idea and try that idea? And she was just, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know my pressures. Absolutely not. And so I just happened to catch the buying director in the reception of the head office one day. And I just grabbed him and said, hey, can I just have a word? I don't want to tell sales out of school. I don't care really about that, but you're doing it wrong. And actually, if you just put these 4 things in place, you'll be doing it right. And he said, okay, why don't you just come back tonight at 7:30? And I was like, okay, what for? He said, I just want to talk to you when there's no one around.
Oh.
So I was like, okay. So, okay, sounds a bit sinister, but I'll go for it.
Yeah.
And so I turned up and he said, okay, if you were the buyer here, what would you do? So I just went into a full, thing. He said, okay, when can you start?
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I flipped that. At that time, they were the world's 4th biggest retailer at the time. Yeah.
German based,
but
yeah. Across the EU?
world. Across the world, yeah. They got.
Metro.
I don't know.
Metro. There's in Canada we have a French brand.
It's not the same as those guys.
I shouldn't say French. We have a Québécois brand.
Yes.
Metro.
Yeah, it's not those.
Okay.
They've got places in China and Russia and all across Europe, France, Italy, Spain, UK. So I went to work for them as their.
I like how China and Russia in people's heads is always kind of the same, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Similar. Yeah. So I worked for them as a beer buyer, and it was my first time on that side of the table. I'd always worked in a sales or marketing kind of role, and then also I'm on the opposite side of the table. But I went into it just completely, open. I said, I don't really know anything about being a buyer.
There's a single job dedicated to buying beer this is global.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I bought beer for the UK, and I worked on own brand projects for their global beer business.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That must have been fascinating to actually look at the potentiality of kind of commanding that buying power.
Exactly. You're like the 4th biggest retailer in the world, right? So when you call Heineken, who we've not had a good relationship with, and say, hey, I want to talk to you about your business here, they
responded.
They take it seriously.
It's a big purchase order there.
Quite large, yeah, quite serious.
Wow. And also, of course, dealing with different multi-territory purchases where you're actually considering the taste patterns of the customer.
That's right. Everyone's a little bit different. That's right.
How was what was the data that you were working off of?
Amazing. They really invested in that sort of stuff, and
this is now in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it would have been early 2000s, probably mid 2000s actually. Just maybe like 2004, something like that. Mm-hmm. I think that they really invested in it, like ahead of their time compared to other supermarkets I've worked for. Mm-hmm. That's not quite as good as what Walmart do. I hear they're pretty excellent, but everything was at my fingertips. I was very much, as a buyer, empowered to find insight and information, create a story or whatever, and then go and take some action. And that was all there, which was brilliant. All customer data, and obviously it's like a Costco, so it's like a membership, or it is a membership. So you see all the transaction data for everybody. You see it all.
That's amazing.
So you can see, not only can you see like the demographics of the people, but what they're spending and what else they spend. And, had big, huge sort of computer created charts that had, coloured depending on certain metrics and size and shape. And you could, what if I took this out of the range, what would happen? And it would all move around based on, the last 5 years data or whatever. It's pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
So I really enjoyed that side of it, actually.
That was the year that the first color BlackBerry came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had a BlackBerry in that job, I think.
2004.
What happened to those guys?
I know. I want to watch that movie.
Yeah, I saw this movie. Yeah, it looks
apparently they're like breaking up the company. That was the other news this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But regardless,
yes,
let's not bring up the ghosts of Canada's past. Our discussion is far more important and interesting.
I don't know. I kind of like my BlackBerry.
Yeah, I miss that thing, man. Yeah. I miss the keys. Keys.
Just a bit easier.
I miss the keys.
Yeah.
And that scroll, it was kind of fun. Yeah. I had the 7100, which was like the first color one.
Yeah.
And then that's why I remember that. I moved to New York in 2004.
Right.
And that was one of my stipulations of this job. They weren't paying me much money, but I said, you have to pay for my cellular phone.
Right.
And I want this top of the line phone.
Yeah.
And I almost didn't get the job because they didn't want to spend $1,000 on the phone. And I remember it was a big issue. And then the finance director gave me the phone. Like, she had gone to T-Mobile to get it herself.
Oh, really?
And she was very
white knuckles.
Very careful with the $1,000. Today, can you imagine if you tell anyone
to
be careful with $1,000 worth of product?
We throw them around.
They don't care.
Although the BlackBerry would have just bounced back and fine, I'm sure.
Super tough, that thing.
Right,
And
exactly.
it was the first phone that had Google Maps on it, which saved my ass being someone who had just moved to New York.
I don't think mine had Google Maps on it.
No, that was the first product that had it.
Right.
It was very, very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we digress.
Of course.
Of course we do. Okay, so it's like 2004, 2005. You are looking at all sorts of angles of the business that you didn't see earlier, right?
Yes.
On this kind of like alcohol
distribution
side of
exactly.
things.
It opened my eyes to the reality of retailing. You know, when my boss at the time said, you know, he's a German guy, so we don't add value. That's not our job. Our job is we buy a box, we put a box on the shelf, and we sell a box. Don't add value. I thought that was crazy, like, because I come from Anheuser-Busch, all about adding value to a product that if it's not in the packaging, you wouldn't really know one from another, right?
Right.
And so I was I found that fascinating, that was like the mentality.
A whole different perception.
Totally different. I absolutely loved it, and I remember, you know, being in negotiations with suppliers who I'd been in their situation. I'd sat in that chair speaking to people like me. So I had this sort of empathy, but then I also had this, well, no one ever made it easy for me, so why should I make it easy for you?
Yeah.
You know, so that this dynamic was going on. And I remember, I was totally open to, you teach me everything. Teach me everything. And they really helped me to be what I considered to be a good buyer at the time. And I remember we were dealing with Heineken, and they got these two sort of German consultants to come and help me in the negotiation. And we were asking for, you know, a ridiculous amount of money, extra margin, all the usual sorts of stuff. And we said, we'll have a meeting with them and we'll get them to present to us, but they must send the presentation the day before, right? So this presentation comes in email. It's like 50 slides long. It's all about their brand activations and all the great stuff that consumers sort of care about, right?
Yeah.
And then the very last page was the deal, how much money they were going to give us, right?
It was like whopping.
It was a big number. And so we sat in this big, huge room and big screen. And then we put the last slide up and we said, right, okay, thanks for coming. We really want to talk to you about the deal. And this guy, Heineken, says, well, no, there's a whole presentation. What about the presentation? And I said, well, we're going to talk about the deal. That's what we're here for, right? And he said, no. We need to talk about how we're going to get to this. And this German guy who'd said nothing in the meeting and didn't say anything else after this, he just leans in and he says, irrelevant. And it was, to me, it was like, there's like a really efficient way to deal with this.
Right.
I don't need to listen to all this stuff.
No.
I don't need to care about all this stuff. I just need to care about adding value to my customers, even though, you know, we don't add value. The value's in the prices are cheap.
Sure.
You know? So if you give me more money, I can make them cheaper, which makes it easier for the customer, right?
Yeah.
And once that penny dropped, I was away.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good.
And so how many years did you have with that brand?
So I worked for them for about 3 years, and then I got approached by a supermarket chain in Australia. And this was part of, I got this reputation of being like the fixer, you know, like I can take something that's broken, I can patch it all up, put it in a night, put it all good, and then pass it to someone to, you know, run with it, right? And so they contacted me and said, we'd like to come and be our beer buyer for a supermarket chain in Australia.
Pause. Question. At Metro, which was the German brand, yes? What was the Zero to Hero story, though? What did you fix?
So it was just a declining customer base. It was they sold to professionals and, you know, so sort of retailers and to individuals that were members, and it was just slowly declining as, you know, supermarkets getting bigger. Online was starting to poke its head around a little bit. You know, these guys had never invested in online at all. They couldn't even buy anything online from them, and so it was just no one had really gone to the supply base and said, right, first of all, these cost prices are not appropriate.
Yeah.
Second of all, because we've been failing, we've been chasing it a little bit. So 50% of the range, I would say, when I started, was there because they needed money and they'd done deals. And these suppliers had said, well, if you list these products, we'll give you this money. And so we want the money, so we don't care about what's on the shelf.
That's interesting.
And then all of a sudden the customers see all this random stuff on the shelf and like, well, we don't really want that. And then they're ramming more stuff in than can fit. Yeah. So the availability of stuff they want is not very good.
Yeah.
So and then that makes them, well, if you can't even buy what I want, why am I even coming here, you know?
It does sound very 1970s.
Yeah.
And so you cleaned it all up and you got a call.
Yeah, got a call from Coles in Australia. So I went to work for those guys, and I remember...
You went there? You moved there?
I moved there, yeah. I moved to Melbourne.
Okay.
And I remember my first day I arrived, and I was there to be the beer buyer. And I arrived, and they say, okay, we've sort of changed our mind a little bit. We don't want you to be the beer buyer anymore. And I was like, oh, God, I've worked in beer for 15 years.
I don't know how to use a mop.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they said, we want you to be our wine buyer. And I was like, oh, my God, this is a disaster.
Complete switch.
Yeah.
Did you drink wine at the time?
I mean, I would have socially drank it.
But did you have
problem?
But did you have a?
Well, no, because I'd worked with wine buyers at Metro,
for it.
and they were all these highly sort of sophisticated characters that had gone on these wine courses,
Right.
and
It's a very Ponzi kind of.
Yeah, spoke a
approach.
certain language that that I didn't really care about.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of down and dirty with own brand beer. Really, I wasn't getting too excited about the latest release from Burgundy, right? So. I just said, this is ridiculous. I don't know anything about wine, and and I know people. I've worked with wine buyers, and that's definitely not me.
Mm-hmm.
And their view was, hey, look, there's a whole team of people that now report to you that are like that, and we don't need one of those. We need someone that's got your background, your beer background, someone that cares about customers and cost and end to end, distribution, all that kind of stuff. Just get on with actually making sense of it. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And they said, well, don't worry, we'll send you on all the wine courses and all that kind of stuff. So I did some of those, which is why this looks like this, because I hated it from the start. And it was great. I actually really enjoyed it. Melbourne is a beautiful city. It's pretty
I can't
cool.
imagine how amazing it would be to be there.
Yeah, it was incredible. I had friends that lived there from my old backpacking days that I reconnected with, and all just smoothly just glided into life in Melbourne. You know, it was pretty nice. And the job, whilst it was pretty challenging, they had some serious demands, and also that was my first real supermarket. It was real customers that actually just choose to come in because they're doing their weekly family shop, not necessarily members that are buying for their corner shop or restaurant or whatever.
And did they have differentiated retail product? Like, were there kind of the neighborhood high street store,
Yeah,
and then
they
also the big store for the weekend buying?
Yeah, they had all that sort of stuff, and lots of different clusters of customer types and demographics, and all across Australia, out in the middle of nowhere and in the middle of the city and everywhere. And then they had different banners depending on, whether it was the supermarket or the liquor store or the big box liquor store or the premium liquor store, all the different sort of versions of it. So it was sort of four banners. There's $1 billion Aussie dollars of spending power that I was responsible for. A team of 15 wine buyers, all that kind of.
How much is a kangaroo buck?
I don't know. It wasn't very much back then, I don't think.
Like relative to Canadian dollars,
I actually don't know.
Are they on par?
I actually don't know.
I have no idea.
No, I remember it was $1 billion Aussie dollars, which might be like 500,000 Canadian or $1 billion Canadian. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite a lot.
It was pretty big. Yeah, it was pretty big. But I enjoyed it, and apart from the courses, and got to know the wine industry in Australia really well.
Yeah.
And I went through a big turnaround with those guys. They were trying to transform what their offers and what they were doing, and actually was quite enjoyable. Yeah, it was fine. And then decided to come back to the UK. So I had almost 3 years in Australia. Got it to where it was a 5-year project, but by 3 years I've well had enough of it.
Right.
Came back to UK and went to work for a supermarket chain in the UK, Morrison's.
Morrison's, okay.
Yeah, and worked on the wine team there, and that was sort of a paint by numbers really. I'd sort of got the playbook now, and you've got the work that Metro had done with the turnaround that Coles had done, rammed that into one idea, and that just became a playbook. It was like, we do this today and this tomorrow and this on Wednesday, and then keep on.
It's more like you were feeling yourself a consultant than perhaps.
Yes, I actually it was quite an interesting part of my career really, because it was through that role at Morrison's that I was wondering, do I really want to progress? Do I want to chase the next job like everybody was doing?
Of course.
And I wasn't really sure. I definitely sort of had a bit of a wobble there as to whether I want to go and push myself to that next thing, or am I just really happy working in this industry, doing something that I can do, turning it around, And so I thought at Morrison's, yes, I'll continue in that vein. And so it was a good job. We won countless awards, lots of write-ups in the news about the wine offer at Morrison's and how good it was. And I remember the Guardian had written, there's one supermarket that doesn't rip customers off when it comes to wine, and it's Morrison's. It kind of makes you feel like, actually achieving something.
Proud, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it was a good experience in terms of the work that needed to be done and what we actually did. I did enjoy it. Same thing happened as what happened at Coles. Got to year 3 and everything that we set out to do on day 1 was achieved. Literally everything. Like, it was performing, it was making money. It was a good range. Customers were responding. Awards were being won for the total offer, for the wines. Traveling all over the world, buying wines from pretty much everywhere. Like, it was all good, but it was all achieved. And I had to decide, okay, do I push for a promotion?
What is the promotion?
What would that actually look like?
Yeah.
And actually I did sort of talk about it, and they said, yeah, maybe you could go and look after the cleaning category. And I'm thinking, I've worked in beer, wines and spirits now for coming up to 20 years. Do I really want to now go and do household cleaning products? I'm not really sure that's for me. So I left those guys and went to work for one of the UK's biggest pub companies. Same, managed their wine offer, ran all that.
So this is an amalgamated, this is a company that has a bunch of pubs.
Yeah, so they had about 1,400 pubs that they owned and they managed. They had like
1,400.
Yeah, about 1,400 that they owned and managed. Wow. And they had a manager in them, and we prescribed everything that they did, the menu, the way they operated, everything.
And these are probably multi-brand, because a lot of these might be heritage
there's probably
pubs.
Like 8 or 9 different brands of pub, from really entry level, great value kind of places, all the way up to super premium city centre London, just behind Buckingham Palace kind of pubs, And so 1,400 of them, and then another maybe at least 1,000, probably more, that they owned, but they rented out to tenants, and they had to buy their products, but they could choose what they were.
Yeah.
So I managed all the wine for all that, and that was cool too. It was an interesting. It was different because it was no longer talking about customers, but talking about guests. It's kind of a different mindset,
right?
Yeah. And they'd been through similar things. They were going for a turnaround. The wine offer had been pretty much devalued to what's the cheapest wine we could possibly buy, And then they put it in, let's put it in a nicer bottle, bit of a thicker glass, a nicer label, but still bad wine. And customers see through that. They go to a pub and spend good money on a bottle of wine, and it's rubbish. You think, well, so I worked really hard there to I'll say so to myself, but I worked hard to improve the quality. So if you're a customer and you decided to spend a little bit more for whatever reason, you were rewarded by it actually being better. So that was the big piece of work with those guys.
It's interesting though, because I would always expect as a customer that when I go somewhere and I look at the list, I have a means of kind of negotiating or figuring out what I know or what I would expect. Based off of kind of varietal and,
That's right.
terroir and house.
Exactly.
So it's interesting because like in this bulk buying scenario where you're kind of commissioning almost OEM wine.
Yeah.
It throws that out of whack. So you kind of the customer's guesstimating a little bit, right?
Well, what happens is, and I spent a lot of time in pubs, some of my own choice and some of theirs. But what I noticed when listening to customers ordering wine is they'd come and say, what's the cheapest wine you've got? I'll have that. Right? So that's the first thing. Second thing they say is Pinot Grigio. How much is the Pinot? I'll have the Pinot Grigio, right? And not really much else. So trying to convince people to, spend a little bit more and have something a bit more special is pretty hard work.
That sounds so foreign, but I know exactly what you mean. That's exactly it, isn't it?
But they did things. It was just some really basic things. Like they had Pinot Grigio as their entry-level wine. So their cheapest wine was the one that everyone asked for.
Yeah.
I say, so why don't we, instead of doing that, why don't we just put a very generic white wine at the entry level that's good, as great for what it is. It's good worth the money. But let's make the Pinot Grigio the second or third on the list and buy one that's better. So when the customer comes in, they're either going to be loyal to the price point, right, here's one for you, or to Pinot Grigio, it's here.
Yeah.
Right? And what happened is, as soon as we implemented that idea, what happened was customers who wanted Pinot Grigio traded up and then said, wow, this is actually great.
But it's so UK too. It's really, it's so funny. Maybe it's not just UK, but like the idea that people will buy, you know, their taste is aligned with a specific varietal
Yeah.
is kind of funny to me because, you know, I mean, it's understandably, it's kind of like an uneducated palate, right?
It is exactly that, which, by the way, is pretty much every customer.
Because the variance within the varietal is ridiculous.
So,
you know,
there's certain great. Now, I'm going to get technical.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to do that, but I will.
you can know stuff and still value simplicity.
Exactly. I think that's the key. There's certain grapes that lend themselves to a very narrow taste profile.
Yeah.
Pinot Grigio is one.
Yeah.
Sauvignon Blanc is another. Malbec is another, right? These grapes, if you buy a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, whatever the brand is, kind of very similar in style.
Right.
Right. And so customers trust that because they don't really know about wine. They don't really care about wine either. And so they know, well, I bought that before and I liked it.
Yeah.
And that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And it's too much of a risk to go anywhere else because these are not cheap products, right?
Yeah.
And so Sauvignon Blanc does really well, Pinot Grigio does really well, and Malbec does really well because of those reasons. Take a grape like Chardonnay, you can mess with that as much as you like and has been messed with. And, you know, a Chardonnay from France is different than a Chardonnay from Australia, is different than one that's been oak-aged. All this kind of stuff happens. And so customers just don't trust it. So never drink Chardonnay becomes a thing. And customers lean towards the grape varietals that actually they trust. And I think that is both what is magic about the wine industry and its biggest sort of hindrance really is customers don't really care and they stick to what they know.
And this kind of takes us towards your venture.
That's right.
Because after that stint with the pub company.
Yes, I worked for a supermarket chain in Hong Kong
Okay.
that had supermarkets all over Asia. So southern China, Hong Kong,
Wow.
Cambodia, Vietnam, Singapore,
Amazing.
all around that area. And I ran their beers, wines and spirits buying team for a couple of years.
Well, that's now a whole left field thing because
Yeah, right.
it's probably a lot of local alcohols as well that people were interested in.
Yeah, there's
regional stuff.
Exactly. There was both.
With snakes and vermin in it.
There was not quite that bad, but almost. Certainly with things in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was the Asian beer, wines and spirits, and then there was, you know, the stuff that I was used to. So there's definitely two categories within that. Definitely.
A whole shelf of just things with like different types of oranges.
Absolutely.
500 different oranges in each different bottle.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
there was
we need them
that kind
all
of stuff.
in this region.
Yeah. And stuff that basically is paint stripper, you know?
Yeah.
Take one sip and that's it. You're done for the day.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What an eye opener though.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was a really interesting place at that time because I arrived on the day of there was a protest with 1 million people were on the streets.
Amazing.
And I arrived on that day.
In Hong Kong.
In Hong Kong, yeah. So I was going to my apartment that they'd lined up for me to stay at when I first got there. And I couldn't cross the road because there was 1 million people walking down the street, you know,
Literally.
in protest. Yeah. I remember the first night, the protest turned into like a mini riot, really. And you got these people out there, they were wearing yellow helmets and gas masks and body vests, and the police were throwing tear gas and they were throwing them back. And I was like in this huge skyscraper looking out my window at basically a riot. And it was my first night and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be, this might be interesting.
This was what, 2018 or something?
It was
A couple of years before the pandemic?
Yeah. It was just before the pandemic. Yeah, like a year or 18 months before the pandemic. That's right.
Yeah, I recall this.
Yeah, so it was a big thing at the time, you know, with what was going on there. And I had people working for me, all local people.
This was all timed around China, you know, taking control.
That's
of Hong
right,
Kong.
exactly. That's what was happening. They had this, you know, one country, two systems policy for Hong Kong, and they were slowly winding that back.
Yeah.
And the local community were not really totally comfortable with it, and it was, you know, that's what caused it really. But it was pretty bad, you know. Some days I remember I couldn't go to work because the riots were happening, and I would watch it live on TV and I'd recognise what was going on. And
You had to remote work.
yeah, I had to work from home those days. Yeah, exactly. I had to use Zoom. Yeah.
And then what brought you here to Toronto?
COVID. So I met my partner in Hong Kong. She's from Toronto.
Okay.
And then when it was COVID kicks off, and we were at home watching the news, and Justin Trudeau came on and said, hey, famously, if you're Canadian and you're overseas, it's time to come home. And then I looked around, she was packing a bag.
And you're like, wait, let me come with you.
No, it's fine. There was literally no cases in Hong Kong. Like it was, virtually nothing at that stage. I said, COVID's not even here. And I need to go back. So she came back, and then, I actually stayed there for another year in Hong Kong because I wanted to finish out what I'd started.
Right.
So we were on Zoom every day, and I came and visited at one point in the middle of lockdown, and all that kind of stuff happened. And then finally said, right, I'm ready to come, and I'm not going to do the same thing. I definitely don't want to work for the LCBO.
Join like Loblaws or something.
Yeah, right. I definitely don't want to do that. I've had enough. So the last sort of 6 months of living in Hong Kong was when I decided, okay, what's the problem, and what do I need to fix that I can do without working for some massive retailer.
And so what was that problem?
So one of the things that happened to me in the previous years with all these jobs was I was traveling around the world wine buying. So I'd be going to Chile and Argentina and California, Australia, New Zealand, France, Italy, Spain, and it sounds like absolutely, you're living the dream, right? You're flying around business class. You're being taken to these wineries. They don't put wineries in awful places too much. They're always quite pretty.
Funnily enough, next to the nude beaches everywhere you go.
Yeah, right. Not quite that bad, but yeah, thank God. So I remember I was in New Zealand, and I was staying at this hotel, and I got an email from a winery that I knew a little bit, and they said, hey, we heard you're in New Zealand, because obviously a buyer from a big supermarket turns up, they all speak to each other.
Sure.
Hey, this guy's here. He said, we'd really love it if you came to our winery. And I was like, okay, what have you got? This is what I'm looking for. Because I've always had a very specific goal. If I'm going to New Zealand, it's not just generally, I'm looking for a solution to something, right? And this is what I'm after. Yeah, we can help with that when you come up. So I look at where it is. It's like a 5-hour drive there and back, right?
Right, to this hobbit village.
Yeah, right, to some random, in the middle of nowhere, I guess. And I said to him, look, there's just no way that I can spend a full day just coming to see you. If you want to come down to where I am and show me the wines, then that's okay, but I definitely can't come to the winery. Oh no, you must see it. We're in a really, really special place, which is usually what they say.
Sure.
So they said, what if we provide a helicopter? Would you come by helicopter?
Fascinating.
Okay, I'll definitely do that.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm sat having breakfast.
I've never been in a helicopter.
It was
no one's ever invited me.
Yes,
it sounds like something you have to invite. Because if you do a tourist helicopter, it feels a little tacky.
The Vegas Grand Canyon tour, I'm sure you could do that.
I could do that.
Anyway, they provide this helicopter, and it's a really stupid story, really. But I was having breakfast in this really nice hotel. I was chatting to this couple from Australia, and I said, I actually live in Melbourne, blah blah blah. Yeah. And the waitress comes over and says, "Oh, Mr. Ingham, your helicopter will be here in 5 minutes." This couple was like, what is this guy?
Can you pack up my beans?
Yeah, exactly. And then you hear it coming, and it landed on the garden in front of the hotel.
Wow.
And they took my case.
What a douchebag.
Yeah, right. What absolute. I actually.
Punts.
I did not feel remotely like this was a great experience when it was happening.
Yeah.
The idea beforehand was, of course, I will have a helicopter take me to a winery.
Right.
Who's going to say no to that?
Of course.
Once the helicopter's hovering above the garden and everyone's looking at you, and you're thinking, yeah, this makes me feel like an idiot. And I got in the back of this really lovely pimped out helicopter, and the guy's in the front, and he's like, okay, it's going to take us 40 minutes, whatever. Sit back, relax, whatever, off we go. I was like, this is amazing. This thing's
quite
amazing,
cool,
right?
man.
Yeah, it's cool. Land in the middle of a winery, they're all waiting for me.
Wow.
Like, it was ridiculous, I think is the word. And so that happened, and at the same time I was talking to a winery, and I was saying, they were showing me the glass production of the bottle, and they were like, we ship the sand from the Middle East to New Zealand, then we blow it into glass bottles, then we fill it, then we ship it to the UK, and I'm buying millions of bottles of this stuff, right? And I'm thinking, this is quite a lot to deal with. And then I'm back on the business class flight, flying back to the UK, taking up the space of 8 people, right? And I was thinking,
tired people.
Yeah,
tired and cranky people.
Yeah, right.
No camembert, and
Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you mean you've not got a centimillion? And I just felt like, wow, I'm really causing problems, or what I do is causing problems. I think importing sand, all that kind of stuff, it just seemed ridiculous.
Right.
Flying around the world every 6 weeks, business class, ridiculous. So it'd been on my mind that maybe there needed to be a different way, and so I started pushing suppliers, saying, what are you doing as far as sustainability is concerned? What projects are you working on? And it's all in the farm. Oh, we don't use heavy machinery anymore.
Of course.
Or we do this water treatment.
Not on the distribution chain. Yeah.
Exactly. What you're doing that the customer can see. And there's some stuff happening, but not really anything significant. And I felt like something needed to be done. And no one was doing it, despite me saying, if you do it, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
If you do it, I'll definitely buy it. And I'll buy lots of it because I've got 1,000 stores across Asia, I'll definitely do it. And they're saying, well, there's a lot of work, a bit more research, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And in the end, when I was deciding to leave Hong Kong, I thought, well, if no one's going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. And that became the mission to create wine that is not so formal, because I alluded to how much I hated the wine courses.
Sure.
I really feel like wine, the category of wine and the enjoyment of wine, is taken hostage by that small subsection of the wine industry.
Yeah.
Like, it's great, don't get me wrong, I love Chablis and Burgundy.
It's kind of
and
like,
all that.
well, it seems dichotomic. Dichotomic? Can you say that? Is that a word?
It is now.
There you go. Two different worlds of wine. There's the kind of like, let's say, taste-driven wine, the defined palate kind of world of wine. And then there's the like kind of alternative to beer. At least here in North America, definitely. Yeah. Where it's like first time kind of wine drinker, girls' night out or whatever have you brands that are like swill, still in that same glass bottle, but it's just swill. And like, why should anyone drink swill just because they have no taste? Yeah,
and that's definitely the problem, is that, if you look at the 100% of wine consumers, 70% of people that buy wine are in the don't care.
It's so true.
Right?
Every time I go in our region around here, Niagara or Prince Edward County, around Toronto, I ask these growers, because I don't want to be insulting, but most of them are terrible. Like, they shouldn't be growing wine. They shouldn't. I see it as an assault on the senses when I drink a lot of this stuff, and a lot of that, of course, is blended, right? And so there's no like real the terroir has no verity. Is that? I don't know if that sounds correct.
I think it can be good here, but it needs.
Can be. It takes a lot of work. You have to bury the vines. You have to keep them warm. You have to like do all that.
It gets very cold here.
So a lot of people buy the cheapest swill that they can.
Yeah.
Then they mix it with the local wine so that it gets the kind of stamp on the bottle. That's right. Right, and then they have different distribution
25%
channels.
You have to put in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's that, but then there's also the stuff that's like, authentic, but a poor comparison to something you can buy for a cheaper price that's imported from a veritable region,
right?
Of a veritable heritage country.
Yeah, you could buy it much cheaper from overseas, right? Yeah.
And so it always fascinates me to see like what the motivations of the grower are. And often cases I'm told, like, in fact, not often, every single time, that the mass majority of what we sell is sold from the farm to local buyers.
That's right.
And it's not tourists. It's not people coming to be like, wow, this is so fun. I'll buy a bottle.
Exactly.
So that blows my mind.
Well, it's just like sort of rural and regional France is the same. Those obviously there's brands.
Price point's different though.
Price points is definitely different here, but people go and fill up themselves. You're like, and they've been doing it forever.
Right.
It's not like they have to worry about sustainability. They're going filling their own containers, which sounds like a really great Whole Foods kind of project, but actually they've been doing it with wine in some parts of France forever.
Conditioner, and wine.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think you're right. There's a lot of work goes into it here, and then because of that, and because of just the costs of being in Canada anyway, makes these price points out of what you can buy from overseas better. It's a shame, really.
So your approach to kind of like encouraging sustainability in the industry was? So
I wanted to sort of try and lead by example, really. So, I'm not a winemaker, but I'm going to make wine. That was kind of what I had. I don't own a winery, but I'm going to make wine.
Yeah.
And this funny quotes. If you want a $10 million winery, start with a $20 million winery, right? It's not really easy to set yourself up in a winery.
Yeah.
In the same way that, let's say, your mate who sets up a microbrewery, right? You can set up a microbrewery for probably $20,000, right?
Cheap,
you can have everything you need to do it. And if you can make good beer, there's people that will drink it. Same as happened with gin. There's changes around the taxation of gin that meant you didn't have to have a massive, enormous still. You could have a small sort of one that made a small quantity, and all of a sudden, people are trying to do it and getting good at it.
Right.
And those categories boom because no longer is it just big corporate brands. It's little independent people just doing it themselves, right?
Did you see that Tesla release a beer?
Did Tesla release a beer?
Giga Brow.
Oh, Giga Brow.
And it was apparently it's $100 a bottle.
Wow.
$100 a bottle.
That sounds expensive.
The most expensive beer in the world.
Right.
I don't know. That's just something from my Instagram feed.
They just need to focus on that Cybertruck and forget about the beer.
What a ridiculous company. Okay, so I like this. So, okay, you weren't going to actually, buy a vineyard and produce your own wine.
So I had this idea that I wanted to solve two problems that I felt was affecting me as a wine buyer. One is I want a wine that is casual, really. That's delicious, casual for regular people that just want to enjoy a really nice wine, don't really care about terroir or the diurnal shift of the temperature of the region or who the winemaker is or even where it's from, right? They just want to go out and enjoy a nice wine or sit at home and watch Netflix and enjoy a nice wine. So there's that group of customers, which is the biggest group of customers, right?
Okay.
And then second to that is how could I put it in a glass bottle after seeing all this stuff around importing of sand and all that kind of stuff. So I thought I need to find a way to fix these two problems in one packaging, which is where this has come from. So it's made by a company in the UK called Frugal. They are a packaging company and they've been working on this for a number of years. And the thing about these projects and these packaging projects that are trying to be sustainable is what became really clear to me is there's no silver bullet that fixes everything in one go. It's impossible to say all the problems that there are with the emissions that come from making a bottle of wine, we solve it in one go. It's not possible. But what this does is it uses so much less carbon than what glass does.
Yeah.
So when a glass bottle is made in the total wine production, 50% of the emissions of that wine bottle is just from making the glass bottle.
Crazy.
So it's a huge amount, right? And so what we say is, well, if we don't have to make the glass bottle, but we can make it out of something that's a lot less intensive on carbon emissions, then we can just remove that part of it to start with. And then when it ships, it's 6 times lighter. So that also saves money.
So what is this? What is this bottle? What's it made out of?
This is a paper board. It's called outer. So this is everything in it is made out of recycled material.
Okay.
So 100% of this is made from recycled products, and then the outer bit is the cardboard breaks apart. You pull it apart, and inside it is the little pouch that you would have in like a bag-in-box wine. So it's a little pouch. Now it is made of plastic, recycled plastic,
and that's attached to the.
This is attached to this, yeah. So when you pull it out, the cardboard pulls apart. It's what, sorry?
One piece, or it's like glued onto.
It's one piece just pulls out. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's made out of plastic, but I think it's like 80% less plastic than a same size plastic bottle. And it is recyclable if you live somewhere that recycles plastic.
Right.
Which, if you live in Singapore, great. If you live in Canada, maybe not as well.
They just send it to the Philippines and burn it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. And so we're trying to say, well, let's take out the carbon that if someone buys this bottle of wine versus the glass, then that carbon has been removed.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the principle. We are working with the company that created this idea on the plastic to say, can we create something that actually we can is a pouch that can biodegrade or whatever? Like, can we make it fully done? If that happens, and I think we're getting close, that would be 100%. Like, it's 100% recycled and 100% recyclable. So there's a bit of work to be done, but we're on the path. It started. So I believe it's better than glass. And also, people were saying to me at the very beginning, well, glass is one of the most recyclable of all products. Well, that's true, but only a third of glass gets recycled, and what doesn't get recycled takes 4,000 years to degrade. So maybe it is easily recyclable if you recycle it, but you're just not. People are just not doing that. So that's where the aim and the vision for it came from.
I think is cool. And I think you told me a little story before we jumped on the mic, days ago, months ago, weeks ago, about the actual. I almost said scribbles. I did.
Scribbles. They are kind of scribbles.
You wrote this on a napkin or some shit, right?
I wrote it. So when I was talking to a few
this
wineries,
is handwritten.
Yeah. So when I was talking to wineries about it, I drew it on the bottle. Okay. So I got them to send me a blank bottle, and I just used a Sharpie and drew it. And I was saying, look, this needs to feel like I'm doing it myself. That's my story, Yeah. I've been the wine buyer that has had frustrations with sustainability in this category, so I'm going to do it myself. So I wrote it. I want it to look like this, and they said, "Great, let's make it look like that. Let's do it. Let's get on with it." The Journey's End is the winery,
right?
And they said, "I'll put you in touch with our design agency, and they'll get them to do it properly." Great. So I had the meeting, told them what it was all about, said I've got this punk attitude of I'm doing it myself, like the Sex Pistols, like Vivienne Westwood, these guys couldn't play the guitar but made a great album.
Yeah.
They were a school teacher that wasn't a fashion designer but became one of the best fashion designers. I'm not a winemaker, but I'm going to make great wine, right? That was my inspiration. They came back and said, yeah, absolutely no problem. And then, come back with a pitch, and it was all, exactly what you'd expect if you'd ask someone, say, make me a punk brand. It was exactly what you'd expect. It was tartan and whatever. And the bill's £50,000. And I went back to
punk.
Yeah, right. And I went back to her and said, is this really punk, spending this money on this kind of stuff? Why can't we just do it ourselves? And they said, no, let's just go with your design. So that was it. It's what I wrote.
Wow.
So
I love it.
It's exactly as I wrote it. And then there's all little sort of quotes and icons that have meaning to me, that's personal to me, that actually I don't explain unless you go on my website. But, no, I don't explain it.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual contents.
Yes, so the liquid. So even despite what I say about customers, and most customers don't care, and they're the people I would like to drink it, and sustainability, the strategy is in the liquid. Okay, that has to be. That has always been at the very heart of it. That it's very easy to put bad wine in cool packaging,
right?
And that happens at every level of wine. Happens from the entry level to the most premium. It's not uncommon. You wouldn't believe it, but it definitely happens to put cheapo wine in really expensive packaging to make it look good, and people fall for it, right? So the strategy is in the liquid. So when we were creating it, and I went down to South Africa and spent time with the winery there and said, look, I want this to be a really easy to drink wine. There's a Sauvignon Blanc and a Shiraz or Syrah. And I want the customer to, when they drink it, to just think, yep, great. That is literally it. I don't want it to be challenging or helping them, educate their palate or any of this stuff. I want to think about, there's a group of lads on a night out that they decide to have red wine, they share a bottle. Great.
How did you find the vineyards to work with?
Luckily, having worked in wine for many years, I knew them, and I knew who did what I wanted to do, both from a
taste profile,
both in terms of taste profile, but also their vineyard techniques, and also what they do in their local communities. Those kind of things were important to me. I could have just gone to an industrial winery somewhere and said, "Hey, I want to buy a wine off you, and thanks very much." But,
Carlo Gallo.
Yeah, exactly. We can definitely talk about that. But I knew these guys, and I respect them both in terms of how they do things.
Yeah.
I respect the wines they make, and I really admire their community work in the local village in Sir Lowry's Pass in South Africa. It's amazing.
What part of South Africa is that?
It's just on the edge of Stellenbosch. It's in a place called Sir Lowry's Pass,
north of Cape Town.
It's about an hour drive out of Cape Town, and it's brilliant. I've been a couple of times over the years, and again, that experience was really firmed up my desire and belief to do this, because I remember being in South Africa, and they were talking about getting to day 0 when they were going to run out of water, and it was like day 20, and on day 0 we're going to run out of water, and that means that there's no water. So the vineyard had to come up with all ways of getting around not being able to use water. They never actually got to day 0 in South Africa, but they were definitely close. And then I was in a restaurant in South Africa, and they given the menu, and I sat in the restaurant. Great. All of a sudden the lights go off, power cut, no electricity. And they come round, put candles on the table and swap the menu out for a barbecue menu. And so they fire up the barbecue outside and it's a different menu completely, right? And so power cuts in South Africa, no water, glass being shipped around the world, flying business class, all these things were coming into me, making me think, well, I really should do something. And if no one's going to do it, clearly I'm going to do it. But I really admire what they do. And then the work with the community, they feed the local community, they employ the local community. Sure. They have a kitchen that they run 3 times a day. The community can just go, take a container. There's a big pot of stew. They doll it out. It's run by a lady called Joyce, actually, who has got an interesting story down in that village. She was going around the shops at the end of the day, basically trying to get whatever food they not sold, take it home, creating something, and going to families who's had serious problems with health that was happening in South Africa, and trying to feed them. And it was happening on the doorstep of this winery. Literally, you can walk to the house. And so she, the winery said, "Hey, why don't we just provide you with the food? You don't need to go asking shops.
Right.
We'll just give it to you."
Nice.
Anything you need, just give it to you. So it's called the Journey's End Foundation. So that kind of stuff is important. And I met a kid who was really good at running, and they couldn't afford running shoes, so they just bought him running shoes. And then they provide the meals at the school. And so when the kids go to school, they get a meal at lunchtime. And at that time when I was there, for some of those kids, that was the only meal they would eat that day. And so what happened is they realized that some kids don't come to school for whatever reason. So they ended up buying a car, employing a lady, or like a minibus, whatever, and she drives around. Whatever kids not turn up to school, she goes to their house in the thing and says, "Why are you not at school?" And it's purely from the point of view of, if you come to school, you'll be fed. So all this stuff is paid for by the vineyard, and it's amazing work that they do. And that was important to me, that if I'm going to do something, it has to be with a winery that is mindful of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
It's very easy in this day and age to go and buy an off-the-peg product, package it and sell it. And, I have some issues around that I don't really like. I give you one example. So, people are trying to get this B Corp status, right? Yeah. It's very prevalent in our industry right now and everywhere, I guess. And I don't have anything against B Corp really, other than it's not really transparent about what the goal is. But, apart from that, what happens is you get these sort of celebrity brands. There's a tequila brand, and the celebrity has got 100 million Instagram followers or whatever. Sure. Goes and buys a tequila that is out of a factory that makes 60 brands of tequila, badges it up.
Oh yeah, and then the marketing tells a unique story. I met old man, Juan Carlos is my buddy
in the field. All that sort of stuff.
Once a year I come up here. And
all that stuff goes on.
Sacrament.
And then
you're talking about The Rock.
The Rock.
Is that who you're talking about?
No. It's actually talking about I can't remember. Kendall Jenner. So she has this 818 tequila.
This is one of those people. Who are they called? The Kardashian
people? Yes,
exactly. Okay. Yeah, I don't know anything about those people.
So her tequila company's B Corp registered, because of all the great sustainable work they do. But she buys it off the peg from a factory tequila, and then she's flying around the world on a private jet.
Of course.
And that just sort of belittles, in my opinion, what B Corp stands for. And I'm sure B Corp has got some really strict measures around what it means to become a B Corp, business. So I don't want to say anything bad about that, but
there's many good B Corps that have a lot of great intentions and even internal processes to managing the sustainability of their approaches and everything else.
I get that, and I think that's absolutely right.
It's a standard that you kind of can, if you tick the boxes, I don't think that there's there's no people in lab coats coming around and
it's not transparent. You look on the website, what is the goal? Yeah. You just don't know, right? Yeah. And also you got people flying around in private jets that then get their tequila brand registered B Corp.
Oh, it's so true. No, there's a lot of bullshit in this alcohol world of
I think
this kind of OEM supplier side of things.
I think so. It's just certainly not authentic. That has been my sort of biggest beef with it, really. Which is a shame, because there's a lot of great companies striving to be B Corp for the right reasons.
There's also a lot of great suppliers that could reach markets better and find, better, let's call it sustainable sales through partnerships with celebrities or other distribution channels.
Do it better, yeah.
And they're struggling to get great product out there.
Yeah.
which is a shame. Always a shame.
I think so. So it was important to me to work with a winery that was credible and authentic, and not just go and buy some product somewhere because, I'm not a winemaker.
Right.
It was important to know them and have a relationship with them, and for us to trust each other and respect each other, and all that stuff was important. And it to be, for the work that they do outside of wine to also be important. And these guys at Journey's End, definitely, I would say that's them.
So this bottle is here because, I should say this bottle is open, not because we drank it.
I've not drunk it, no.
But this is a packaging sample.
That's right. It was, exactly.
And the filled bottles did you say just arrived?
They just arrived to the agent here in Canada like yesterday.
Okay.
So they arrived yesterday. So he's bringing them up from Niagara or wherever he is, to have a taste through. I tasted them in London when I was there last time, but so I still haven't had in Canada the finished article, but in the UK it's fine.
And this agent will be stocking it in the LCBO.
Yeah, so we went and met the LCBO in a couple of months ago now, and went over to the office there and presented all the work we've been doing and why we're doing it, and talked about everything. I'd heard some horror stories, but actually they were great.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no effort. That's good questions.
It didn't feel like the headmaster's office.
No, definitely not.
You didn't get the tacky.
I had to coach myself. I really was like, don't say that you're a wine buyer. Don't say that you're a wine buyer. I didn't want them to think like, hey,
buy the book.
I did your job. It's easy. This is just going to do this. Yeah, I didn't want to be like that. Yeah. So I did tell them, but as part of my story, I'm doing it for myself. But no, they were really great, and they said they got a range review happening in the end of summer, and they would absolutely consider it. They congratulated me for what was been achieved so far. We talked about all the listings that we've been winning in parts of around the world, actually. So
the product is available elsewhere.
It's just launched in the UK, so it literally just launched like in the last week in Britain's biggest pub company, not the one that I worked for, but one of them. I think it's the biggest. There's three that say they're the biggest, and I work for one, and the other two, they've listed it. So the one I work for hasn't. I'm not sure if that's testament to how they feel, but the two that I didn't work for have both listed it, which is great news. It goes live, I think, in the next week. I think in their pubs. We listed it in MMI in the Middle East in Dubai, and they supply all the resorts in the Seychelles and all them sort of places. And we're having people are asking really good questions about it in terms of the customers, because they're saying some people is totally about the cardboard bottle. They're like, wow, this is great because it helps with our sustainability plan, or we pay for the weight of our waste.
Yes.
And that, whether that, like the Seychelles, for example, they import a pallet of wine, the consumers in the fancy resort drink it, and then they have to send that pallet of wine back to Africa and they have to pay for that. Yeah. Whereas they can recycle this on the island. So they have to pay for that second shipping. So there's a saving for those guys there. Airlines are interested because of the weight, and it's purely a calculation for those guys. They say everything
for smaller bottles.
Yeah, they
personal bottles.
They weigh everything on. Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool, but I'm nowhere near that.
Okay.
But they weigh everything that goes on the plane and everything that goes off, and even if they say 1 gram times every flight.
Wait, so then if it's not personal bottles, they'll be pouring out of this in the first class and business class.
Let's hope so.
So you are making changes to that.
I hope
lifestyle,
so. I would hope so. And then it's so customers have responded in. And when I say customers, I mean
buyers,
resellers. Yeah, buyers have responded to all sorts. People love the fact that it doesn't talk any wine, any wine nonsense. When we talk about tasting notes, we say the Sauvignon Blanc is fresh and the Shiraz is smooth. That's it. You don't need to know anything else. Just drink it and then you'll decide. And when it comes to the actual wine, we were talking about the strategy in the wine. We could have easily gone with a base level wine. It would have been great, but I had this view that this potentially could be picked up by someone that doesn't really drink wine, and I don't want to put them off in their first glass or their first bottle. If someone who's a bit younger, some sort of millennial, Gen Z, whatever, who's old enough to drink, buys it and it's the first time they bought a bottle of wine, it's got to deliver, because I want them to come back and buy it again. And if we'd gone too low in the wine, which is traditionally what happens when wines are made for entry level sort of people just starting out, then they're just going to say, I don't really like wine. Well, it's because you've not had a good one, is the honest answer. So
you stand by the quality. You think it's really good.
Respect it up, absolutely.
I can't wait to taste this
next week.
And So what's the road ahead immediately for people listening around the world, specific regions where they will be able to find this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things happening. One is if you live in the UK or the Middle East, or hopefully Canada, if we can convince the LCBO, then you should be able to go to your local pub, restaurant, or bar, or supermarket, liquor store, and buy it on the shelf. And one of the reasons why it's important to me that it is a bottle is so it goes on the shelf with other bottles.
Right.
I really want it to be available right next to the glass bottle. It's a choice right there, not hidden with other different formats, and that's I think we're getting there with that.
Yeah, it'll stand out. It'll be interesting, something new.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah, so that's the case there. And then the other side of it is, I really would like to make local production. It's not necessarily in Canada, but we've been speaking to wineries in Chile and Argentina and Australia, and saying, why don't we do that, but there, So instead of even shipping it from South Africa, why don't we make wine in Australia for the Australian market,
right.
and make it in Chile for the South American market? Try and make it so it doesn't move around, the world too much. That would be the perfect sort of scenario.
I love it. So it's only the beginning.
I really hope so.
Are you excited?
Yeah, it's been a long sort of time coming, really. I bought one of those, those white pens that you can write on glass, and I had this view of Hong Kong, and I was writing, this is the problem, what's the solution? And I had this huge, big, like crazy, I'm going to say beautiful mind, but that is definitely not. That's definitely not the case. But I wrote it all on the window, and my plan, and slowly but surely it's a step at a time.
Coming to fruition.
There's lots of ups and downs in starting a new business. Obviously, I worked corporate forever, right? And this is totally new to me, and I'm trying to not enjoy the highs too much and not be put off by the lows too much. I'm trying to just evenly go through the middle. We talk here about the maybe, the maybe proverb. You heard that?
No.
That's the guy it's a Chinese proverb. The guy on the farm, and his horse runs off, and the neighbours say, "Oh, you've lost your horse. How terrible." He said, "Oh, maybe." Then the next day the horse comes back, but brings a load of wild horses. "Oh, how lucky." "Well, maybe." Then his son is trying to tame one of the horses, breaks his leg. "Oh no, how terrible." "Maybe." Then the army turn up looking to recruit the next day, but they can't take him because his son has got a broken leg. "Oh, how lucky." "Oh, maybe." So I try and navigate this maybe proverb.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy the highs too much, and I don't get disappointed by the lows too much. I just navigate through.
That's true entrepreneurship, because there's always, there's no ultimate destination.
Right.
It is just the way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting used to people telling me no. That's I'm getting quite good at that.
Yeah. It's something that I just, it's funny because it just goes through your brain. It's like, okay, no, well, you're on to the next thing. All right.
That's right. Exactly. No just gets me to a quicker yes somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you were never going to be a yes. So it's not really a no.
Exactly.
It's just a maybe.
So that's a new experience for me, all that kind of stuff. I'm used to having power, in the supermarket. I just gave that all, I stopped all that.
It's good. The humility of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, cool.
And it's kind of cool to see that you are doing this from here, because this is perhaps one of the toughest places to be in the alcohol business in the world.
I realize.
Because for all of our listeners who haven't really kind of clued in, who might be outside of Ontario and outside of Canada, in Ontario, we have this thing called the LCBO, which is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. And they are the world's number one in terms of volume buyer.
They're way up there. I think there might be one or two, something like that, but massive.
So they buy for all of us lovely citizens and distribute it into the shops that we're allowed to purchase this wonderful.
That's correct. That's what they are. Yeah, it's quite an interesting setup here, definitely.
It is. It's weird. So all the buyers buy through the LCBO, they import stuff, they sell it to the LCBO, and then buy it back from the LCBO's warehouses.
That's right. Even if you want to get listed in a local restaurant and not even in the LCBO store, it still has to be approved by the LCBO.
License.
Yeah, right. It's got to all go through the LCBO.
It's like the LCBO is. Yeah, it's definitely. It's very strange. It's very strange. There's not many places in the world where prohibition kind of had lasting effects like that.
Right. Yeah,
and yet, back in those days, Toronto supplied booze to the States.
I know, right?
Quite a lot of booze was made here and shipped across, right?
Exactly. When you go into the LCB office, they've got these images up of their old old stores going back like to the beginning, and they look like old sort of like bootlegger kind of places. You know?
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's good. So
Nice.
yeah, been an interesting journey so far, and hopefully it will continue, and people will get to try it, enjoy the wine, and not have to worry too much about the packaging. They can just chuck it in the recycling, and it's not a thing.
Yeah. Wicked, man. Well, it's super exciting that you're doing this. Thank you for sharing your story with us and coming on the podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me. It's great.
course, man.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
That's cool.